Life talks to itself through every man's tongue, but listens with only few ears. Is this where the mystics come into play? You bet your sweet hearing aid it is. A maxim that makes immediate sense is a chump maxim. Men like to get in bunches so they won't be by themselves. Could you tell me what you call that sort of statement? Yes, but not just now. Those three were connected, if that helps. Life says, I got you again. In the affairs of man, any particular one can keep you entangled in two ways, by either having you support it or criticize it. Compared to the mystical, there is no way to objectively judge. Compared to the physical, there is no way to objectively judge mental success. This is why men go to such extremes to do so subjectively. Whenever his thoughts would turn serious, this one man would smile in private bemusement. The never-ending mortal march of progress has, at the head of its parade, the intellectuals, the rich, the alpha wolves, and the pillars of civility. At its rear is the head of the next generation's procession. As the future sauntered by, it tipped its hat your way. It seems only polite that you return the greeting. With the ordinary, all talk is judgment. After the mind was cooked up, life gave it a binary, polarized world to think about, and thus stay properly distracted. Those who find it difficult to swim individually find solace in floundering about in collective social concerns. The extent of charity is equal to the limits of language. Back to school definition time. Self-reference. The simple-minded's intellectual late excuse from their mother. Free eye exam. If you can't see around corners, your sight is incomplete. And if, when two fingers are held up, you don't see four, well, forget it. Cry of the wild city goose. The clever are miserable. I hope. Honk, honk, honk. The reason that men have more facets to their personality than do other creatures is to make it easier for them to find fault with one another. Mortal myths brought into modern times. In this instance, specifically, the origins of all earthly evil. Any choice of words is the wrong choice. The legend of one band of neural knights, never spoken of, tells that when one of them reached the desired state, his tongue would be removed by himself. Warning, unless it's already too late. What the hell am I talking about? Of course it's too late. But here's the warning anyway. Once you're past being a child, the first step to adult stupidity is being serious. The cute, though infuriating thing about the simple and the other good people in the middle of the parade is that they have no idea where they are in the overall scheme of things and no suspicion of the length of the procession or of what is at either end. Mount Obviousness revisited here on the weekend when it's not so crowded. Those who can't help themselves are almost always agreeable, if not downright anxious, to help others. Life tells everyone a secret, but no one but mystics seem to pay it much attention, or remember it, or take it to be of any particular importance and like that. When he awoke one morning, one man discovered his left foot attached to his right leg and his right foot to his left. He later told his mind, learn a lesson. In a sense, verbalization is an attempt to negotiate the nature of reality with the mind. Update of nothing in particular. Some men's minds are from another planet, some men's words from another world. The mystic's trip described. his train reaching its destination while everyone else is still rolling. Consciousness not expanded to full capacity will always see the mind as separate from the body. No, your eyes aren't playing tricks on you. From a slow-moving train, the scenery is supposed to appear slow-moving. Note, we here at the New Intelligence Network strive not to serve as a perfunctory outlet for PSAs from justice, based upon its operational overlapping with other such civic organizations as Reality, Reliability, and the Damn I Should Have Realized That Foundation. One of the more striking abilities men have over animals is talk, a unique talent that can both save your life and get you killed. Reloader's safety reminder. Words won't give you trouble if you don't take them seriously. To keep men concerned over the purpose of life is to keep them from recognizing the purpose of life. A more conscious mind's work is never done. You figure it out. With his hand somewhere between his gun and nut, the futuristic kid said, "Okay, Ringo, this town may not be big enough for both of us, but my mind is." Dissected and described. Feeling insulted when you believe you're a mystic. One of life's little ways of reminding you of just what a twit you can still be. A bargain pack of definitions. Gossip, the science and philosophy of the simple-minded. No. Self-reference, what you do when you run out of gossip. Criticism. There ain't no criticism in this. What else do the simplistic have to talk about other than themselves and the other simple-minded? Our inspirational thought for the day, direct version. Anyone who looks for anything intellectually outside themselves is an idiot. Well, close up the schools and burn down the churches. Don't be silly. Some believe that they are mental elephants surrounded by fleas. But even if true, they're still outnumbered 1,000,000,000 to 1. Anyone who looks for justice in the world of man and does not recognize it's covered to be the majority has vision that's not hitting on all 8 cylinders. Why do you think the collective call it reality and mentally submit themselves thereto? The easy way is the greasy way. Efficiency, man is thy name. The difference between the simple and the point blank is that the simple is what the collective parade of progress marches past, and the point blank is what the individually more conscious can see, be it simple or complex, be it now or in the past or future. Another distinction is that the point blank need not be talked about. In fact, in its more advanced stages, it has no native tongue. At the airport, at the arrival gate, stood a man with a sign that asked, What might a more active mind be? At the airport, at the arrival gate, stood a man with a sign that asked, might a more active mind be no more than a merry-go-round with a rocket up its ass? In the intellectual world, anyone's an expert who says they're an expert. Check with your own mind in this matter to see where that puts you. Routine madmen are short-lived and do no long-term damage. Life knows how to pop its own pimples. A fellow asked, why do not men find it interesting that the only successful treatment for psychological problems is through drugs? A word in recognition of beauty. The inherent internal quicksand is in the fact that talking about anything will help keep you off the transcendental track. Note, some still continue to confuse beauty with justice, which is okay since they're the same thing. Certain laws of subatomic physics that almost reach the certainty stage. Almost everyone who's stupid will attempt to hide it through seriousness. Hey, really, I'm not kidding. Yeah, but back to real life in the airport. A sincere vegetarian can get a fruitcake past the metal detectors. No, really. One hemisphere of everyone's brain is fiction and the other nonfiction. Only problem is no one knows which is which. Question: how can you tell when a more conscious mind has lost it? Answer: well, there are actually three ways to tell. When it becomes either serious, combative, or begins to display symptoms of wanting to convert and rescue others. City employment tip: if you imitate someone even dumber than you are, you might get a job as an entertainer. How to be a fake mystic. Take real simple stuff and make it sound real complicated. If need be, make up new weird names for old common things. At one level, words have no meaning, and even more so when taken seriously. Education as practiced in the city. Hysterectomies for the mind. The wondrous world that is the continually expanding intellect of man is like an orchestra playing music that is being written even as they perform it, and led by a conductor who is simultaneously receiving directions from the players. A hungry physical man is always afraid that he's going to die. A mentally unfulfilled mystic is certain of it. The difference between the physical and mental in man, besides there being none, is that the physical doesn't need to be told what is serious and what is not, and the mental can't be. Schoolyard tip: when you're from out of town, all the other kids will pick on you. One man said, all this talk regarding being alive is beginning to make me sick. And life replied, don't be silly. How to be a fake mystical leader if you live in a large city. You don't have to be smarter than anyone else. Just find a bunch of people dumber than you are. No. Anyone concerned for life doesn't know the secret of life. Words were the original concussion grenade. Anyone concerned for life doesn't know the purpose of life. Okay, how to be a fake mystic if nothing else works. Yeah. Announce that you are a mystic, then die before they can check. Anyone concerned for life doesn't know the intent of life. Anyone concerned for life simply doesn't know life. The collective march on unknowingly. Only the individual willfully. Environmental update. It would be harder to destroy life on this planet than it is to demolish your own mental perceptions thereof. What ordinary minds call the problems of life is life. Yeah. The other side of that coin. Simply living with the facts of life is the way of the mystic. The difference between a mystic and someone who doesn't give a damn is that a mystic wouldn't let it show. You cannot be indifferent to being alive, only to talking about it. The bus stops here. Everything that every divinely inspired religious teacher and mystic alike ever say is simply their personal view. But a mystic will admit it. I told you the damn bus stops there. Several of them, specifically the last one, using again the idea of the religious in the widest possible sense and the idea of the mystical, and they are not as distinct as the mind would have it, but you've got to remember the mind will always have anything as being distinct or it will not operate. That it must feel as though there is a clear-cut distinction, whereas it is a continual, gradual process, such as a parade, such as the electromagnetic spectrum, such as the length of my, well, we won't go into that. Anyway, it's just this long thing. It just continues on, and it's, my mind, that's my list of complaints regarding the Quaker Oats Company. When I say a mystic, also, I am in no way ever insinuating, even subtly, that we're talking about me, which I'll get into in a second. Not me, but the fact that the way that the ordinarily religiously inclined must use themselves as an example, and everyone else, but taking religious again as being like the public, recognizable, acceptable form of whatever mysticism is. All this weird, the ideas of some kind of great, weird, conspiratorial secret work and people trying to do the extraordinary something or other. If we take that as being, the strange, unusual, occult, mystical, transcendental, out of the ordinary part, then over here we have the religious part. And they're not that distinct, but the religious part does embrace everyone. It accepts everyone. Anything that qualifies as being an ordinary religion, a commonly recognized religion, you do understand will accept anyone. It may ask for a few things besides your money. It may say, well, don't eat a pork sandwich here in church. Or, don't come in with 3 naked women in the middle of the service. But other than that, they will accept anyone's appointment. They are trying to convert the world. Each religion says that it is their charge by the gods, by the great cosmic forces, to give everyone the correct view, to try and bring everyone into the bosom of Allah or God or Vishnu or whoever. Whereas in the real mystical realm, there is nothing even remotely resembling that. Not even remotely. If a mystical system ever talks to you, it probably goes, no, we're not a mystical system. What the hell you want? We're not open yet. Mystical system be the only 7-Eleven store that closes at 5 in the afternoon. Or where's it? It closes whenever you get there. At any rate, that's a segue. A meaningless segue, you can either cough, spit, or say, well, at any rate. At any rate, get them all out of the way. There is, what I'm trying to get you to hear in a minute, there is a quite useful, personal reality to the broader context of me addressing or using the terms the religious and the mystical. Now, the last one where the bus stopped, the way that was presented, said that everything that the divinely inspired, as it was written, it was in quotation marks, but I want you to understand that I'm taking it from the ordinary view, from ordinary people's view. Not real mystics, not real serious people. People that are just kind of religious and they're kind of interested in matters. They could not even be religious. They could be interested in flying saucers and Atlantis and all kinds of occult matters. But they would still be religious in the sense that it's fairly socially acceptable. I use divinely inspired not as a joke, not as being sarcastic, nor do I intend it literally. But I am using it from ordinary people's views, the divinely inspired knowledge, statements. It doesn't get any higher than that. All right? That with the religious, say Christians, the Word of God, right there out of the New Testament or in the Old Testament, however they analyze it, nothing is any stronger than that. A minister or a church can say, well, we've had theologians throughout the years have tried to interpret so and so, and well, of course we have adopted certain rules here in the local church, etc. But there it's the Word of God. It doesn't get any better than that. And they say that Jesus actually was in some way part of the Godhead, the great forces, and he actually spoke for God. Muhammad supposedly, anything he said under the influence of the angel saying, read and speak, the gods, Allah, just actually spoke through him. So from that view, now this is open to ordinary people. We don't have to be mystical. The ordinary view that it doesn't come any stronger than that. That's why I threw in divinely inspired. And as you know, people out in ordinary life that would not even admit to being religious, that would claim otherwise and say that they're an agnostic perhaps, they would still, most of them, be inclined to grant some extraordinary philosophical privilege to religion, to at least parts of it, that they would say, well, certainly Jesus was, had he not been cloaked in the guise of Judaism or Christianity or something, would have been a world-class humanist. That anything he says we can live by. I do not have to go to church, but anything he said, the Ten Commandments. And you could take the same thing in Buddhism, Islam. But the divinely inspired seems to be have great significance. The item said that everything that I'm trying to give you a wide spread, you understand, from here to there, that everything that even the divinely inspired religious leaders, that's excluding no one, that includes everyone you ever heard of, all of them, all the way from that to a mystic, everything that they ever say is simply their personal point of view. Mm-hmm. But a damn mystic will admit it. First page. Life talks to itself through every man's tongue, but listens with only few ears. And then it's a little dialogue. Is this where the mystics come into play? You bet your sweet hearing aid it is. You do understand, if I'm not making this clear enough, we'll rub our feet in it. Ordinary religious people, just ordinary, sane, middle-class people, would take extreme, if they weren't yielding the right of way, if they were not busy doing that, they would take and give umbrage, trying to get into traffic, to hear it said that even the divinely inspired, the Jesuses, the Moses, the Muhammads, the Buddhas, people that said, and they're now accepted, at least by that religion, and by a wide segment, the majority of humanity, when answering polls, will claim they're religious and believe in whatever their local prevailing religion is, that they would take great umbrage and exception, did they hear it said very specifically, that all the divinely inspired, no matter who it was, no matter what apparently after the fact was the basis of it, of them saying that the gods told them that, or after the fact people saying, well, the gods or some great cosmic force, but normally the gods, had to be speaking to this man. How else could he speak such truth, such reality, such astounding manner of words strung together? It had to be through some kind of divine inspiration. It was his personal point of view. It was his opinion. Now you know that would not go over. So now let's say that we'll assume that I'm speaking, let's imagine I was addressing an audience of really would-be mystics, not a religious, ordinary religious type in the house. And I said, well, that's the same thing with the mystics. Not that Jesus and all those guys who are out there in public, but the ones, and if I started saying, name your favorite mystic, or who do you think, and you started naming some of the more obscure, the Eckharts, whoever, you started bringing them out. And I said, well, same thing. And you brought up, I don't care who. Think of anybody you want to. The most obscure mystical writer in any area and any era, contemporary, anybody. You're thinking of somebody. Everybody's got some sort of little hero probably still floating around that you think, God, boy. Whatever he said, it was his personal view. Now, mystics, even being a more magnanimous mindset as a rule, would still take exception. Because if that be true, then you have just about pulled the plug on the whole idea of some kind of mystical work. Because you're saying then that there is no objective reality to it. That even the things that you've read, that you keep writing down, or some book, maybe one particular section or some of the collected writings of Buddha, something you keep going back to and you go, well, it's just endless. It's just bottomless what I get out of it. I can reread it, and 2 years later I'll read it again, and it tells me something else. And it's just, in some way his mind was plugged in to great cosmic forces, and he just could look at things and just in a few words, this is his opinion. That would not go over either. Let me tell you what's going on. Life, through every man's tongue, is reflecting on itself. But it only listens with a few people's ears. Now what this says is that you have a cacophony of sounds. You have a symphony made up of 6 billion minds, with tongues, they have to make the sound, but life is writing the score in 6 billion minds continually. And through 6 billion tongues, the score is played, even as it's being written. But then life only listens to itself with very few ears, not even coming close to 6 billion, not even coming close, I hate to give you a figure, but I'm talking about nowhere even hardly in the same mathematical universe. But here's what you have. But understand the justice of this. Understand the efficiency. Life can speak. Life can reflect on itself in 6 million ways. Of course, all we're talking about is man now. That's the only thing that's of any interest to us. What the hell do we care about anybody else in the other planet? Got that out of the way. All right. Life, understand the efficiency. Life can reflect on itself in 6 billion ways. Now think, when I say efficiency, we're talking about, it's actually another level of meaning to the word efficiency. Try it yourself. Instead of you having to sit around, you got to have some awareness of things out of the ordinary for this to make any sense, practically. But you should know how hard it is. There was an environmental update that said it would be easier to destroy this planet, to blow up this whole world, than it would be to demolish your own mindset. And that's a fact. Those of you that have any awareness that is so subtle, it's fine, I hardly ever mention it because there's not much you can do with it. You either see it or not. It is almost impossible for you not to think the same things over and over and over and over. And the mind can even believe otherwise. The mind, if you just say, well, wait a minute, he's right. Sometimes I do think too much. And if you remember that yourself and say it, that will almost give you a mother's excuse. That'll almost get you out of detention hall. That'll almost destroy. That'll almost blind you and distract you for God knows how long. You understand? You'll keep thinking the same things, but as long as you can just think, wait a minute, that's true. I think the same thing over and over. Wait a minute, I'm getting sly. I'm getting hip to that. And then you can go right on. For those of you that didn't know how you liked it the other night, the item that says it was entitled, Why Repetition Sucks. And it went, repetition will make you, 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 it'll make you. I assume I made the point. Because if you could, it would make you. I don't know. It seems to be that the word maybe sick calls out to, be plugged in. But back to the main road. Life is continually, I was going to say the efficiency, if you could see how hard it is just to break out in general of thinking about the same thing. And it gets even more and more subtle. It's not just thinking about the same thing. Most people say, well, you're right, because I keep thinking about the purpose of life, or I keep thinking about why there's injustice in the world, whatever it is you think about. And you say, you're right, and I keep thinking the same thing over and over, like, well, there's injustice in the world because of, and for years, I don't know why I grew up thinking it's because of the inequality of the distribution of wealth. Let's just pick that one out. And you can say, and I realized I kept thinking that, and my father used to always be railing about the bankers and all the rich people in the world. I don't know, it couldn't help but have had a psychological effect on me, and so I kept thinking that. And you're right, that can't be the full answer. There may be some reality to it, but I should expand it. But you understand the subtle captiousness in that. Because the mind is still saying, well, what I'm thinking about in general, that is, the injustice of the world, you still take that as being a given. You still take that as being a given, proper way to use the mind. And the mind will go, well, let's get in there and let's remind ourselves not to keep thinking the same thing about that subject. Screw that. Don't think the subject. That's when it really gets. Very few people get past that point. Because it just makes your head, it doesn't hurt, it makes your head get yucky and sticky. And it seems like it's beginning to go like a Salvador Dali painting on a hot day. It gets running. Because the mind, go, well, what am I going to think about? I only think about important things. How the hell do you know they're important? The only way you know they're important is I think of them all the time. But I'm trying to expand, because now, at least on these subjects, I keep saying, wait a minute, I shouldn't keep thinking the same thing. Wise up, chumps. Tell yourself. It's not that just it's not just the bankers causing injustice. How about thinking about the matter of injustice? You think, well, what's there to think about? It's easier to destroy all life on this planet than it is to break up your own mindset. Now, it doesn't matter what, because your mind will go, you're right. I do have a certain mindset. I keep thinking the same thing about the matter of justice, and I should change it. I just got through talking about that, and you already forgot it. What? Life, the efficiency I was going to point out, once you understand that, I was going to compare and say that efficiency, taken to a new oomph level, is the fact of life being able to reflect upon itself in 6 billion ways. Just using the population of the planet, 6 billion, and assuming that everybody is reflecting and thinking on things in a slightly different way, just to make it sound interesting and cute. So life is reflecting on itself in 6 billion ways. What if you could sit and reflect upon your own mind? Reflect upon whatever you want to reflect on, not in one view and not in two views, which, 2 views make most people have to lay down and put cold compresses on their head. What if you could sit there and reflect, assuming you can pick out something worthwhile, but whatever it was, that you could reflect on instantly in 6 billion ways? We're talking about, if you don't like efficiency, how about a whole lot of fun? How about neural thrills? Life can do that. That is, from one view, one acceptable. Real view, that is one of the purposes of man, not it. Life is reflecting on itself, it's thinking about itself, it's talking to itself through every man's mind and tongue. But it is only listening to it with a few ears, which is sort of another way of saying that it is reflecting on itself at any given time or whatever is happening in 6 billion ways, and then almost simultaneously, to deal with linear minds, a few seconds after that, after it's done the 6 billion instantaneous reflections and given 6 billion views about what's going on, it only selects a few. And that's what changes the way things go. That is where people try to make a living as astrologers and soothsayers, and good luck. Of course, it doesn't matter. They don't need luck. All they need is your poor memory. And their own. Life only hears a few. It only listens with a few ears. That is, it only selects something out of the 6 billion, which is why ordinary minds trying to predict the future, it's not just silly. And name's better. Because if ordinary people had any intelligence, even those who try and predict the future, you would first they'd have to take my old, everybody remembers my great challenge, the one you enjoy so much that you all say, talk about it more. Is what are you personally about to think? What are you going to say next time you speak? Like right now, what are you going to say? Blah, 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 blah. Why'd you know that? Well, I don't know. I just said it. Would you make a soothsayer? Not even to yourself. How can you predict the future when you can't tell what you're going to say next? Would you move on? Okay, good. I'm agreeable. I know that nobody likes to hear that. Well, it makes your mind kind of run backwards. It was like Salvador Dali coming out of the grave, which was bad enough seeing him alive, but to run that film backwards, I know it. No one wants to contemplate that. Everything that everyone says from the divinely inspired. And I'm taking the ordinary, remember you, we're not being sarcastic. It is accepted on this planet that people, if they were not divinely inspired, if we're going to move into those past the ordinary religious context now, even they would say, well, something happened to the people. They were touched by genius. They had some sort of intellectual wiring. They were intellectually just accidentally of such a nature that philosophically they could say things. They could see the nature of life in a way that's just genius. That's all it was. All right. So you can call it genius. You can call it divinely inspired. It's something just extremely out of the ordinary, and it's always considered to be prototypical in content. That is, that's why we call them, or that's why the ordinary people call it, maxims, proverbs. I know they have sometimes a less specific or a more colloquial meaning, but a real epitaph, a real proverb is like a gem of wisdom that's not just localized. It covers the full spectrum of human experience. It affects everyone. That a real good one, you can be a Christian, a Jew, a Buddhist, Muslim, an atheist. But if it says, reap what you shall, reap what you sow, all over the planet, that will sell. It will always sell. No sane person will go, that's just bullshit. No. They will just, you cannot naysay it. It is words of wisdom, and you could still say that it was divinely inspired, or you could say, no, but whoever first said that, they were in some way wired genetically. They were simply a genius. I don't know who they were, but I don't believe that God told them that. But you're right, that was not an ordinary opinion. Sure it was. The divinely inspired and the mystic alike simply express a personal view. The difference is a mystic, the point I hadn't put in yet, if they were going to say anything, is what the parenthetical aside should be. The difference is a mystic, if he's going to say anything, would admit it. Not publicly, because he wouldn't even be talking anyway, but he would understand it. Trying to get closer here. So we have life speaking, talking to itself, reflecting on itself through every man's mind. It then wants to speak, as witnessed by the fact that everyone does speak that can speak. And even people that don't have a tongue will try. People who are mute, what do? They try to do it. Everybody wants to talk. They try to do it. And, if you cough their hands, they'll try to, I don't know what you call it, learn how to do signage with your toes. Life wants to talk. Very few people out of the 6 billion at any given time, very few people publicly stand up and talk. That is, try to make a public spectacle of themselves, try to become famous, try to attract a crowd. Assuming that anyone's still listening to this, assuming all of you people, again, you know that this is not even hidden. It's not even camouflaged criticism of religion, of humans, of anything. But remember that the mind will sound that, will take it, it will hear it that way, because if your particular mind was wired up, let's say, to be religious, anything that does not fit in to your paradigm, your mindset of religion, will sound as though it's criticism. That's simply it. So you got to learn to live with it and understand what it is, or do better. Okay. Life is speaking through every man's mind. Everyone who thinks is doing a little piece of thinking, 1/6 at the very least of what life at any particular time is trying to think and consider. That at any given moment you're doing at least 1/6 of what life is going on. Very few people, as you notice, still has to do with the leading of dances and the dominant and the submissive and etc. But there are very few people on the planet actually get up. They may try it once or twice, but almost all would-be entertainers of all sorts are pretty easily discouraged. There are very few people that persevere in standing up and going through whatever it takes the process to become a priest, a rabbi, or a freelancer, to get out there and hack it like a sawdust revival tent preacher and have to pack up his car and drive for years and years and try to build up a following. It is the same thing as a guy out there playing guitar, playing piano, working in nightclubs. Now we know the ordinary religious person, and probably some even not so religious, go, that's not true. And it's true. There is no difference between a guy playing, there's no difference between a Jerry Lee Lewis and a Billy Graham. There's no difference between the Pope and Balanchine. Anybody gets out and well, I'm stretching it to go into just the physical. Anybody who gets up and talks. Anybody who uses the mind directly enough through the tongue. I shouldn't say Marcel Marceau because we all know mimes don't have a brain anyway. The Anti-Mime Society paid me to say that, by the way. I don't care. Anything that resembles, for those of you who might be seeing this on a casual basis, I should be a little more specific, and withdraw the Balanchines or pulling out sports figures so that you don't get too distracted. It's anything publicly. They're still in the same boat, but it makes it it's a little too subtle to use a specific example. Anybody gets up and specifically does something. A singer. Somebody who gets up, and they may not even be singing their song, but somebody gets up and says, well, here's a song that means a lot to me. Feelings or whatever it is. I left my heart in San Francisco. A song that has some sort of little meaning, like, well, here's something I think you lovers will like. It's a great Irving Berlin song, old, but it still touches the heart. It's the same thing as somebody standing up and delivering a sermon. It's the same thing as a rabbi making some commentary on the Old Testament. It's the same thing as a Buddhist priest. It does not matter. If someone is standing up and they are apparently attempting to convey something that has some intellectual nourishment to it, if it be no more than a social commentary or it be no more than a love song like, don't let casual matters break up true love. Just, some love you could think, well, it's just a throwaway song. But you find people sitting there and listening and go, yeah. The person doing it treats it seriously, like, well, we've done a lot of dance songs here, but if we'd like to slow it down now, the band and I'd like to do one that I wrote or somebody wrote that we all fall in love, and we have our ups and downs. Life is not all, sweetness and apple blossom time, but you get a little arpeggio on the piano. The guy says, but here's a little song that I think will bring across the message that we should be forgiving and not be too quick to cut off true love. In the band, in other words, it seems to have, I'm not making fun of it, it seems to have some intellectual, they might call it emotional, but it has some verbal, intellectual nourishment beyond just hollering, I feel good, which, no offense to JB, but it's not just a dance song. That is the same thing. It is the same thing as a man delivering a sermon. There is no difference in life, in a man speaking for life and standing up, and the context is religious, it is educational, it is scientific, it is psychological, it is just entertainment. There is no difference. None. Now, with the ordinary, there certainly is. And they are correct when they would deny this. That to them there is, or they would not go one place over the other. But you've got the mind again having to make a distinction. The mind deciding, well, it's Saturday, I'll go out to a club and maybe have a drink and have some fun. But tomorrow I'm getting up and going to church. Tomorrow Sunday morning I'll go to Mass. And if you say, well, it's the same thing, it is not to them. We all know that, but it is the same. It is life talking to itself. When it gets into the areas more specifically, that I was hoping you would hear the contrast and then find that there is a pragmatic use for this in you. To take the extreme from an ordinary view, far removed from simply an entertainer, a comedian, someone singing a love song, a psychological counselor, into the areas that would seem to be of unusual, extraordinary importance, the divinely inspired. What they're falling back on is the same thing as the singer, my singer in a nightclub saying, well, now here's a little song that McCartney and Lennon wrote in their early days. And I don't know, it just seems to touch something having to do with the real human relationships. I mean, sexually between men and women, but almost between us and the planet. Give me a C over there. That's the same thing as a preacher referring to the Bible. The divinely inspired, those who attempt to speak, those who stand up publicly, and all they want is a following. I just make it crude, there's no offense to it. But anybody who stands up and says, I am a psychologist, I am a preacher, I am a rabbi, I am a social commentator, I'm a political observer, I am a critic of the arts. Anybody that stands up, they're trying to get a following. They want a damn audience. That's simple. And you've got to understand that to ever get past choking over specious reality, choking over your own perceptions of this planet, of life. Because anyone who stands up is giving their personal view, and anybody who stands up wants an audience. They can say, well, I'm only here to help you. That's just bullshit. I don't mean that they don't believe it. Well, they want an audience. If you don't believe it, well, you've got not a point of believing. You either see it or don't. Because they don't get an audience, as I said, most people are pretty easily discouraged being entertainers. If somebody can stand up on a street corner and holler, God sent me personally here with this extremely important message. And people stop for a while. He tries it 4 or 5 days, and they keep saying, well, everybody come at my house, or I've rented this room up in a hotel, and we're going to have meetings, and I'll be more specific about it. And nobody shows up. Man won't last long. God may have told him to do it, but if God don't furnish an audience pretty soon, he's going to think, well, screw this, and he'll get a job driving a cab or doing something and go back to heavy drinking without hiding it from his would-be flock. Religion serves, in the widest possible sense now, religion serves a specific purpose that is never taken into consideration by the ordinary, as they're not supposed to. What it serves as is everyone wants to be covered. It's time to get simple now. We've got 10 minutes. Life is speaking to itself through everybody's tongue. And we could start and say that we got 6 billion opportunities. We could say that life is not even sure which one of the 6 billion people at any given time it will listen to. That is, of its own reflections. It is not sure, put another way, which of the 6 billion may actually stand up and become a new, renowned blank. Minister, rabbi, psychological observer, political pundit, public figure who apparently is speaking something of some importance regarding pointing out life. It's always on a critical basis, but it's pointing out, well, here's some things that we should consider. It is life speaking, and without playing with words anymore than necessary, ordinary men, be they ministers, be they psychologists, be they writers, be they sociologists, if they make comments that seem to be astounding, and the only way an ordinary pundit knows they're astounding is he gets an audience. So he gets an audience. He writes a book. One of the easy ways nowadays. He writes a book, and within a few months or a year or so, it's not only a big seller, but he now is doing seminars. He's a psychologist, sociologist. He could be a political writer, but he now is commanding fees. People come out and pay to hear him. It is only now, it's no criticism, no sarcasm, it is only on that basis that he knows he's any good. It's only then that he knows that he's saying anything of importance. So, now he has an audience. Now let's go back to the extreme of that which would seem to be in the same ballpark, on the same cosmic level as the mystical, as the transcendental, the religious. But all the way from that to my political observer and everyone else, here it is, his wisdom, the jewels that he now speaks, and people sit and they pay large sums of money to have him show up, and they come and they ask, could you meet me in private, or could I, would you sign my book? They are impressed with it. He knows he doesn't understand anything. The only way to live with that is you must cover yourself. You must attribute what you're saying and the effect is apparently the salubrious, enjoyable effect that it seems to be having on your audience. Is you must have apparently some extrinsic source of inspiration. You have heard comments regarding the purposes of the Holy Scriptures in the full sense of the word all over the planet. But it is even more subtle than that, because you do not have to refer to the Holy Scriptures. You don't have to actually use them. But you always have to have the sense, you, not just the person doing it, but you and the audience, there has to be the sense that what you're saying is so astounding that it's beyond a personal view. It's not an opinion, and it doesn't have to be just religious. Just religious, and especially the divinely inspired, seems to be that which is really irrefutable. If you're buying into the story, if you show up and it's a religious speaker, and he says, well, here's what God said, well, what are you going to do with that? If you already are of that mindset, if that's your form of entertainment, and you know that you and the speaker, superficially at least, are pursuing the same God, you both say that you're Christians, let's say. That you both say you're Baptist or whatever. Then whatever he says, if you've already read his book or you like the way he talks, you like the way he, and he says, well, here's a new thing God said, you're not going to stop and say, wait a minute, I don't think God said that, because then he'd have to say, well, do you talk to God? And the truth is, no, or you wouldn't be there paying to hear him. If you were his type, you'd be out there, hacking at yourself, trying to stir up interest and start your own church. But the people doing it know that they have no fallback position. There is no good explanation of this, and that's why I said I was trying not to play with words. It's not, I can say that they unconsciously know this, which I always hesitate using that because it has so many ordinary connotations. It's just unknowingly. It's just that men don't know what they're saying. That's what it amounts to. But once you say something that seems to be of some depth, that is, people will show up and go, my God. They take this kind of attitude of, oh my God. And it could be religious, or it could be, let's say, psychological, that somebody has some theory of why modern day man has a psychological frame of mind and general view that he does. And I won't make up one, make up your own. It's just what sounds to be a new theory, for a new book. All right, for it to become popular, it has to have a widespread effect. That's self-evident for it to be popular. But when something becomes popular, be it religious or non-religious, it has the feel to it, it has the tacit acceptance by the audience that it is objective. That is, it's not a guy saying, well, my opinion is that people have psychological problems because they eat too many sweets. I'm just making up something now, I'm assuming that wouldn't get real big following. And you could say, well, that could be true in some case. I've heard about kids, supposedly a few people, get hyperactive over excessive sugar, so I don't know, maybe. That won't go. For it to be the point I'm talking about that apparently is based upon wisdom, down there, divinely inspired, it has the feel of being objective. It has the feel of being proverbial wisdom. That is, it is true for everyone. And so that's what it has to be, for it to be that impressive. So then for me to say, well, it's all one guy's personal opinion, that could not fly any more in the face of the collective's perception of reality if I tried, which I did, and that was the best I could do. Blah, 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 blah. They could not be more offended by that. That is, they could not more easily reject it. They're going, well, no, you can't have it both ways. If it is apparently objective and fits everyone, that it is exhaustive in its truthfulness, in its validity, then it can't be someone's personal opinion. That's exactly what it is. But it being that, men have to clothe it otherwise. They have to say, well, it is divinely inspired, or on the contrary, in the alternative, they can say, what I'm trying to present now, and they will doctor it up a little bit, and they'll have statistical evidence. They'll say, I've been working on this in the lab, and I've been working on it through my polling and my research for over 10 years, and I'm now ready through this book that I have here in my speech tonight. I'm going to give you my new paradigm, and it's not just theoretical. I believe I have enough information now, specific practical information, that I can construct for you a whole new model of man's personality. And it continually goes on. That's nothing new. They've been doing it since the Greeks in the Western world, and somebody right now is doing it, and somebody's, I'm sure, with a new book. But you understand, it has the feel, whether he says it or not, you don't even think about it, that it's not simply his opinion. I mean, hell, everybody's got an opinion. The people that came in paid money got an opinion. But you think, what the hell's an opinion? Even a dumbass like me has an opinion. But this guy knows something. And when you say know something, what it means is it's more than his personal opinion. There is nothing more than a guy's personal opinion. That's all you got. You got 6 billion pores in the brain of life. And out of each pore oozes a little sweat constantly, and each one is that little pore's view. The difference between ordinary people, serious people, priests, the divinely inspired, the philosophical, those who spent years and years studying, doing research, getting degrees, the difference between them and a mystic is, a mystic knows it and admits it. What could be worse to a scientific mind, to an objective mind, than to label somebody's idea, to label some piece of knowledge or data or information going, what could be more dismissive than say, well, shit, it's his opinion. That goes hand in hand to saying, well, the man has no credentials, he has no standing. I mean, it's his opinion. You say, well, are you sure that he has no background? Oh, no, we checked. He's nobody. He just come running out of the woods one day and he says, life is so-and-so. Well, shit, I could have done that. Right. Of course, people do, except they don't have an audience. Once you get an audience, and you're the sort, if you're part of that particular audience, you take whatever the the priest, the thinker, you take what he's saying. You're supposed to. It's not a mistake. You take it, and there is some validity, of course, operationally out in the general parade of life. You take what he's saying as not simply being his opinion, because if that's all it was, he would not be there with an audience. I'm changing the use of it a little bit, but you're getting fast. That it would simply be his opinion in the sense of being able to dismiss it. But once somebody becomes famous, they become a spokesman for a generation. They become a spokesman for a particular religion. They become a spokesman for a particular philosophical or psychological school of thought. It's beyond the realm of one man's opinion. In some way, the man has plugged into a greater area, a field of objective reality, which is just plain bullshit. It's his opinion. That's all you got. You're one little pore. To be a mystic is to be aware of it. There's more than that, but that seems to be kind of offensive enough. I thought it'd be fun to start off the week that everyone from the divinely inspired, which most would-be mystics kind of dismiss that, even though I took up for them and said it wasn't an insult. You could go, oh, people that say God talked to them, that's from my grandmother or somebody that believes that. What I want's the real thing. I want somebody that in some way is actually plugged into the great secret work, and somebody that's in some way actually into the objective reality, not this subjective stuff that passes for reality in church. It's all the same thing. It's one man's view. Not just about, well, to fakers, to people that actually belong on a bus instead of a plane. That can't be. There's got to be some objective reality. Yeah, there is. Life. Or put another way, the closest thing to objective reality in man is if you take all 6 billion subjective realities and put them all together. Which is sort of what a mystic does. He just does a kind of piece at a time and he doesn't care. I mean, if a mystic, actually, by mystic you understand, somebody that knows what's going on in life, if they actually tried to tell you, whatever it would be, and they told you, and you went, well, Jesus, that's just, that's your opinion. He'd think, well, what kind of idiot am I talking to? Certainly it's my opinion. But that was just one of them. I got 6 billion others. Not really, because for a man to know the secret of life, I'm going to have to tell you, he's already seen a goodly portion, as that great philosopher, I think Andy Griffin would say, or somebody, a goodly portion of the 6 billion. So it's not just hit or miss, it's kind of hit or hit. But except it's real hit or hit or hit or hit or hit or hit. You got to do 6 billion right quick. Are we out of tape? Good. That's my opinion. Are we out of tape? That's just your opinion, but go ahead.